Good morning and welcome to the May 12th, 2025 Finance Committee meeting for the Lee Summit School District. We'll begin with item 1.01, contracts of $15,000 or less. This is a relatively short list compared to other months and pretty typical for this time of year. What you would see here are mostly food trucks and for end of the year activities, as well as setting up contracts for next year. Additionally, DJs for end of the year activities and then field trips. Are there any questions about items that are on this list? All right, thank you. Moving on to item 1.002, contracts of $15,000 or greater. We will talk about every item that's on this list with the exception of one. It is the Midwest Orientation and Mobility Services. That is a renewal, and that did not increase over the CPI. So that is one item we will not talk about. But all the other items on this list are items that we will discuss. Moving on to 1.03. Health supplies for inventory. I'm going to turn this over to Krista Battaglia. Mrs. Battaglia.
Good morning, everyone. This is a bid that we bring every year. It is for inventory items that we stock in the warehouse for health supplies for all of our school nurses. There is about 100 items that we stock, and we went out for bid for these as usual. About late March, early April, we posted it on our e-procurement site for 2 weeks, and we received 6 responses. The purchasing department, as well as the health department, reviewed all of those items and chose what we felt was the best value for the district. They do have some standards on some of those items, so we made sure that those were bid as the standard items that they needed. And we are recommending award to 4 vendors, Henry Schein, McKesson, Surgical Government Solutions, and Henry Schein, McKesson Medical, Medco, and then School Health Corporation. Sorry, some of them have really long names. But anyway, we're recommending award to those 4 companies because together they complete the list of the inventory items that we need to stock. I'll be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Morning, this is Michelle Dawson. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Good, good. So I have just a learning question so I can get up to speed. Are these 4 vendors distributors or are they manufacturers? Because they look like distributors.
They are distributors. That is correct.
And so there are no 1 or 2 distributors that cover everything, which is why you awarded it to 4?
Correct.
Okay.
Some of the items that we stock are Band-Aids, gauze. We get into more, detailed medical items. And then we have some items that are just as simple as the little treasure chests that we put a lost tooth in. So it kind of runs the gamut. And it's been our experience for the last several years that we haven't been able to award to just one distributor.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you, Krista.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Battaglia. All right, moving on to 1.04, Sumner 1. Dr. Whaley.
Good morning, everybody. So this is year 5 of our current copier contract, which doesn't seem possible. But all of our copiers, all of our multifunction devices are up for replacement this summer. So back in February, technology worked with purchasing to send out an RFQ for replacement devices. We received 7 responses, and we had a panel of 12 building leaders, clerical staff, technology, nutrition, business services. Given an initial review of those 7 responses, we had a scoring sheet for them. We ranked them on financial stability, service capabilities, references, reputation. And from that, 4 vendors were invited to come in for in-person interviews. So that team got together. I think there were 35, 40 questions that we walked through with each vendor. We rescored. Purchasing took those results, combined them with the initial, and Sumner One rose to the top as the service provider that could provide the best service and best overall experience for our district. So we reached out to Sumner One. They came through, went to every site in the district, evaluated our current copy fleet, pulled numbers off of the machines to kind of evaluate, is this machine being used beyond its capacity or under its capacity? And they created maps for each building and kind of right-sized the fleet. So in order to get our copy machines ordered in time to hit the beginning of the next school year, we're bringing this to the board now as an intent to do business with Sumner One as we finalize, the small little details with regard to working with a couple principals to say, is this really going to work for you? Is it not? So we're just wrapping up the details. This will be a 60-month lease. We're currently still working through pricing. So if the board should approve this, we will let Summer One know that we'll intend to do business with them, and then we'll bring final contract back at the June board meeting for final approval. And that just, again, that allows them a thumbs up to go ahead and start ordering copy machines, so they'll be here in time. Are there any questions? Okay, hearing none. We're going to go on to 1.05, access management for software. Mrs. Leach is our data systems director, so she's available for questions too. So this is a tool, as you know, in the district, we've got several thousand apps that students use on a day-to-day basis. And so, of course, we take student data privacy very seriously. And we've been looking for a while now about how we can better manage the types of data and who we send data to for students. So this is a tool that's going to allow us to use our PowerSchool, our SIS, to use this tool to then send username, passwords, any information a software needs to allow a student to use that software. But the important part about this software is that it allows us to mask certain types of data that a vendor doesn't need. So for instance, you might find with our current solution, a vendor may only need a first name, last name, and say username. But it often takes too much information and sends it to the vendor, and we'd like to stop doing that. So this particular software allows us to restrict and only send the information that's needed to that vendor. Also, down the road, this also has some additional features we may activate for students. For instance, multi-factor authentication. We'd work with buildings to see if that's a good fit or not to turn on for students. So it's got a number of other security things, but for this year, we're just hoping to implement the sending of data from our systems to vendor systems. Are there any questions?
Yes, it's Michelle again.
Sure.
I'm going to have a lot of questions because I'm just learning everything. But so when I took a look at this one, it doesn't compare it to your previous vendor. Is it because it's new scope and new capabilities, or were you just summarizing? Did you compare other vendors? How did you end up with this vendor?
Yeah, there's only a few that do this, and our current solution is actually free. But I'd say free is in quotations, because what will often happen is while our current is free, they will bill the vendor, and so the vendor will sometimes come back to us and say, well, if you want to use that, we're going to increase your subscription. So there's some, it'd be hard to establish the cost. But we went out and we looked at, Kimberly, did we look at 2 or 3 different? Would that be correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, so we looked at 2 or 3 different ones. We checked with other districts in the area that use solutions similar to this, and this is the one that just keeps us popping up as a good one to use.
Okay, I think that answers my question. Thank you.
Yep. Any other questions? Okay, so then my last one is 1.06, audiovisual equipment and services, permission to use the cooperative agreements. So in previous years, we have used these 2 vendors. We've had a lot of success with them. They're extremely responsive to our needs. The level of service they provide is amazing. The quality of their work when they come through and install or quote, they're very collaborative. And so our current contract's expired, so we are bringing these co-ops forward for reapproval through May 31st of 2028. And so these are bid through the TIPS, National Institute of Government Procurement, but sorry, let me back up. TIPS is the interlocal purchasing system. So they're bid through TIPS. And we feel that these will be the best services for us with regard to audio enhancement, TVs, displays, any of that AV equipment that pops up from time to time throughout a school year. And so this particular item is asking permission to use those cooperatives up to the approved technology budget on an annual basis. So for this year, we have an approved tech budget of approximately $1.3 million. So we would use these co-ops to procure those services and items. Does anybody have any questions?
Yes, I do have one.
Great.
So when I was looking at these, so they're both renewals, right? You've used these vendors in this past year, right?
Yes.
Okay. And I noticed in the documentation that one of them gives you a 5% discount per the tips formatted document, and I think Best Buy for Education gives you a 0%. Is that standard? I mean, is it competitive? If they've given you good service and good pricing all along, I could see why you would want to stay with them. I'm just wondering if 5% and 0% are typical. I don't have anything to compare it to.
Yeah. On a co-op contract, that's pretty typical because they're just based on volume of all the different organizations that are going to use these contracts. Oftentimes we'll find with Best Buy or KCAV, because we're ordering in such a huge volume, the initial pricing will be based off tips, but we oftentimes will push them and say, hey, we're going to order 30 TVs. Can we do a little better? And they will oftentimes easily come down. So that's kind of picture that as kind of the initial starting point, the maximum we would pay, but they'll oftentimes discount.
Okay, so that's kind of like the base. Okay,
Yeah.
got it. Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Dr. Whaley. Moving on to 1.07 Belfonte Dairy bid renewal. So the initial contract was entered into last year. This is the first year of the renewal of that contract. The reason this is coming back is because there's a 2-cent increase per carton, which is a 5% increase, which is above the CPI. Otherwise, this would not be coming back to the board. It's just the extension of last year's original contract. Are there any questions? All right, moving on to 1.08 Roma Bakery. This is the initial contract for this service. There were 2 respondents, Roma Bakery and Bimbo Bakeries. Roma provides fresh bread. That is an expectation that we have here in Lee Summit, and they're the only bakery that does that. So Roma is being recommended for this bid. Are there any questions?
Yeah, just a quick question. If this is the first time, where did we get our bread before?
Well,
Like,
no,
where are we
we've
getting-
used Roma. No, Roma is where we use. We've always gotten our bread from Roma.
Okay, because it says new contract under quick review, and so I was
Well,
just curious.
it's a new contract because the old contract expired.
Okay,
And
So-
so like many of our contracts, they have it's an initial contract with maybe a 3 or 4 or 5-year renewal. But once we get to the end of that, then we go through the more formal procurement process.
Okay, all right. Thanks for clarifying that. Appreciate it.
And typically Mrs. Danella would be here, but she's on jury duty today.
Gotcha.
All right, thank you. Moving on to 1.09 Cornerstones of Care, Dr. Barger.
Good morning, everyone. Cornerstones of Care is the organization through which we contract for our BIST services. And this is the contract for next year's Building Consultants and Vision Team Conference to move forward with our BIST services, which we have utilized for 20 plus years. Any questions on that?
Yeah, I did have a quick question. Is the slight increase from last year versus this year due to increased scope or just increase in pricing?
Not increase in scope to my knowledge, just increase in pricing.
Okay, thank you.
All right, moving on to 1.10 Lexia renewal.
Lexia is a intervention and or practice piece of software related to reading skills. Our Title I-A buildings get to build needs-based budgets to identify which interventions would best meet their needs. And 2 of our title buildings have requested the use of Lexia as a support for that. Both Meadow Lane and Lee Summit Elementary utilize that in their title building plans and have for a number of years. So this would be for the licenses for those under our title funds.
I got another question. So I noticed that, so we have 3 title buildings, but only 2 are using it. Is the 3rd building using a different program?
They've actually done some in-house interventions, so they are not utilizing an external Lexia program, and that's what each title building gets to do. They get to look at their needs, build their plan, and then decide how they're wanting to respond. But no, they're not using an external program that's different. They've just done some in-house interventions that are a little bit different and may use those title funds in staffing or in other ways to support those in-house interventions.
Okay, so each building gets freedom to choose what they need. Okay. And
yeah,
then
within
I
the
noticed,
plan that they build.
okay, gotcha. And then I noticed that one has like building wide and the other one has 225 licenses, which is actually more expensive. Would it be cheaper for, I think it was LSE using the 225 licenses to go to building wide to save like $8,000, or is there a specific need that they have to have individual 225 licenses?
I'd have to look back into that. Typically that's because there's specific grade levels that are wanting to be found, but let me get that answer for you as to why the discrepancy there.
Okay, because yeah, it just looked from the summary, I didn't have all the details, that building wide or open, whatever, unlimited licenses was cheaper. So I just thought I'd ask.
Okay, let me get into that and figure out where that discrepancy is for you guys.
Thanks.
All right, thank you. Moving on to 1.11, I believe Dr. Mathis is going to take this agenda item. Thank you.
Good morning. Yes, this is just for a renewal of N2Y. That's news to you, and it is our core functional academics program that we use K-12 for our life skills programs. It does support some core academic instruction, and then it also has a tool called Symbol Sticks, which helps to create visual supports for students, and that is actually used by special education teachers, not only life skills, also our speech language pathologists and the behavior interventionists in the school to create visual supports for students who may require some extra behavioral support. Any questions?
Right. Thank you, Dr. Mathis. Moving on to 1.12.
Dr. Shelton, I was able to get Ms. Dawson's answer to her question on Lexia, if she'd like that. I just triple checked and it was what I thought. Because Lee Summit Elementary is only using it at certain grade levels, even though the per license cost is a little bit more, we're still net in the positive for buying it that way. Whereas Meadow Lane is using it across the entire building and thus the building wide.
Okay, so is the summary then just not, I mean, there's some overhead costs that I'm not seeing in the breakdown on the board docs. I mean, because I mean, then there must be some additional cost. Then you're saying that it's overall a net positive to use the individual licenses, right?
Yeah, that's the information I just got. Let me keep digging then.
Okay. Yeah, no, I mean, it might just be that the summary is misleading because I'm seeing some portion of the cost or something like that. So I might be like misunderstanding the summary. So thanks.
Okay.
All right, thank you. Moving on to 1.12, Network for Educator Effectiveness. Dr. Carlson.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Shelton. So this is the renewal of the Network for Educator Effectiveness, is commonly referred to as NEE. It's a tool that actually we partnered with the University of Missouri at its inception years ago to develop this tool. This includes the technology tool that for our classroom observations, for our professional development plans, as well as training annually for our building leaders. There is a small increase to the price. I would note that for the first, about 10 years or so, the cost was held at 50,000. So the last couple of years is the first time we've seen the price go up. So happy to answer any questions the group has.
All right, thank you, Dr. Carlson. Moving to section 2, the finance section, parameters resolution 2.01. This is a resolution calling for the sale of the 2025 A bonds. This is a sale of about $42.5 million. The purpose of this resolution is to call for the sale of these bonds, but also to provide parameters that the underwriters will use as they move forward with the sale of these bonds. And so in section 2.02 of this resolution, you'll see let's see. There we go. There are 5 areas where the parameters are being outlined: the true interest cost, the weighted average maturity, the underwriter fee, the final stated maturity of the bonds, and then the call, what's typically called, commonly called the call date. So it's a 10-year call date. So these are the parameters that the underwriters will use as they go out to market. So what are the advantages of a parameters resolution? The advantages are it gives the underwriters flexibility to read the market and to go out when it is most advantageous for the school district to sell these bonds. Additionally, once this resolution is approved, it does not need to come back. The sale of the bonds does not need to come back to the board. It would be finalized simply with the signature of the president or the vice president, which is also witnessed by the secretary of the board. Are there any questions about this resolution?
No, that helps me with context on it. Just reading it, just reading it cold. I was thinking, wow, that's a lot. But you kind of gave me enough context that I think it answers a couple of my questions. So the rest of the document, other than this section that you just highlighted, which gives the parameters so it doesn't have to come back to the board and all that, is the rest of it kind of boilerplate or
Yes.
standard? Has
Yes.
anything significant changed since the last time?
No, you are exactly correct. That there are certain portions of this document that are boilerplate. Well, a large portion of this document is boilerplate in nature. This section is the real where you will see variance from document to document.
Got it. Okay. That answers it. Thank you so much.
All right, very good. Thank you. Moving on to item 2.02, the parameters resolution for the 2025B bond refunding. So as along with the sale of these bonds, we're going to refund a portion of the 2020 bonds. Very similar. It just gives this resolution calls for the refunding of those bonds, but also it provides guardrails for our underwriters to use as they go to the market. And so the parameters are a little different in a refunding than they are in the sale of bonds. And so you'll see the principal amount, you'll see the true interest cost, you'll see the gross savings, minimum of $250,000 savings to the district by refunding the average maturity date, the underwriter fee, and then the final stated maturity date of the bonds. And so once again, to Board Member Dawson's point, a large portion of this document is boilerplate. This is where the real variance in documents and these resolutions come. So just like with the other resolution, once if the board approves this and these are refunded, the board president, vice president would sign off on the sale of this refunding, witnessed by our board secretary.
And yeah, that's really helpful. Thank you so much. And the so I just have a very fundamental question. And is the refunding something that we typically do every few years, or are we trying to take advantage of some good thing in the market like lower interest rates or something like that?
So typically we will only do it when it's to our advantage. And so what is to our advantage? Sometimes it's because we want to take advantage of the market and get lower interest rates. Sometimes it's because we need to restructure our debt so that we have advantages in the future as we move forward with our debt. And so, we have a lot of debt, and sometimes we need to restructure that debt to our advantage. And so, but in this case, we're refunding a small portion of our debt to do both, to help us in the future, but also to take advantage of some market conditions and save at a minimum of $250,000.
Oh, great. Thank you. That's helpful.
All right. Thank you. Moving on to 2.03 transfer of funds, Mr. Holder.
Good morning, everyone. For the month of April, our transfer from the general fund to the special revenue fund is $2,738,440.80. This is a little lower than we would typically see on a monthly basis. There's a few months, as we know, that have some variance. But the main reason this is a little lower is we have the first third of our early childhood special education reimbursement that came in April, and we'll receive the second third in May and then the final third in June. And with that payment, that's a little over $1.9 million. And not all of that is Fund 2 or the Special Revenue Fund, but a portion of it is. And so that's revenue that we don't typically receive every month. So I would anticipate that transfer next month being a little lower as well. And then, of course, the final June transfer is larger because we have both the June and July payrolls for our teaching staff. Any questions on the transfer? All right. We'll move on to the treasurer's report. And the first report that we'll look at is our revenue and expense report for the month ending April. So what you're looking at here is 10 out of 12 months of the school year. So we have over 80% of our fiscal year finished. We have, of course, the same amount of payrolls finished for our 12-month employees. For our certified teaching staff, we have exactly 75% of those payrolls completed because we'll still have May, June, and July. So the bottom line is the end of the fiscal year is starting to come into focus, and definitely at the end of May, it'll be a little sharper focus. And of course, by the time that we have our finance committee meeting in June, not all of June will be complete, but we'll have a significant portion. So starting with the revenue up top, if you look at the operating fund, we are getting closer to our estimated budget. As you look at a comparison to last year, we're a little over 2% better than we were at this same time. Now, I will caution that our Jackson County collection is still lower than what we budgeted. And we're beginning to run out of time. I believe we have 8 more collection dates. We received one we've received 2 in May. And at the current pace, while it will be better than last year, and you remember last year we were $5 million short, almost $5 million. It is better. It's already better than that currently, but we're still in a bit of an atypical situation where that is not going to be, barring a major unexpected change, we're probably not going to see what was budgeted. Now, that's not the only portion. It's the largest portion, certainly, of our operating fund revenue, but it's not the only portion. And some other areas are coming in higher than was budgeted. So my hope is that we can get as close as we can to that $164.1 million. I also neglected to mention, I meant to say this at the start, the estimated budgets that you see are reflective of the amendment that was approved at our April board meeting. So both revenues and expenses, and not all of those changed, but several of them did slightly. Those are reflected in those estimated budgets for both revenue and expenses. On the special revenue side, you'll see that we are just under $20 million shy of what we have collected, what we budgeted for. I still feel good about that number. We still have, as I mentioned, that early childhood SPED payment. We'll receive a third of that in May and a third of that in June. And the SAT, the state adequacy target with our basic formula, is still not fully funded in terms of our payment. And we certainly anticipate that it will be, but the state is typically cautious, and sometimes it's not until your June payment that you receive that final amount. So I feel like we're on track there. We'll still have some title program revenue coming in. So I feel like we should get close to that budgeted number. Debt service, we will not get that budgeted number, but we'll get closer to what it is now. Big picture, we're just fine in the debt service fund. With the defeasance that we made, we're still in good shape with our overall balance in debt service. And that is really just reflective of the county and coming in slowly there in the debt service fund. Bond fund, of course, has been unchanged for multiple months, but that will change in June. And then the capital projects fund, you can see that we're very close to what we budgeted for revenue and feeling good that we'll meet that estimate. Moving over to nutrition services, there again, almost 82% of what we budgeted, which it tracks to really the point in the fiscal year that we are in. So I think we'll come very close to that revenue estimate and may exceed it slightly. And then activity is tracking a little over 86% in revenue, budgeted revenue. And of course, that includes just a small portion of the foundation, but the well over 95% of that is activity revenue, right where we would anticipate it to be. And then the same for before and after school services, 87%. And so that's tracking to exceed that budgeted revenue. So let's move down to expenses. Again, going back to the left side of the page, you can see there that in the operating fund, we are tracking very well. And this is important because, we adjusted both of our expense estimates last June, so June of 2024. So really what I'm watching there is that we should be below at the end of April of 2025, where we were end of April 2024. And so you can see there with the operating fund, we are significantly, almost 2%. So that's a good sign. And I would want to see that trend continue, or at least if we maintain that 2% level, that would be great. Special revenue fund, we are below, but it's just a little over 0.6%. So again, I'd like to see that. What I'll be looking for at the end of May is to see that gap widen a little bit to the good. So to see our fiscal year 25 expenses as a percent be maybe closer to 1% lower than at the same time a year ago in May of 24. So we'll be watching that. Again, I'd like to see that gap widen here in the last 2 months, and I anticipate that it will. The debt service fund, you can see we're tracking very well. That budget will stay just under that. Really, other than maybe a very small administrative fee of less than $1,000, our debt service fund expenses should be tracking right where they are. Bond, again, we will see the bond fund expense once we receive that money in June. Some of the items that we paid in anticipation of the bond passage will raise that budget, and then on a corresponding level, we'll lower that capital projects fund budget. You can see we're very close to what we budgeted there, 99.25%. We did that, remember when we made that amendment, it was as if, there was no bond issue, because you have to prepare for the fact that it may not be successful. So we made that amendment with that assumption, knowing that we would have enough money in capital projects to do so. So the reality is that budget will come down a little bit. The bond budget will go up a little bit in June. But remember, in the eyes of the state, bond funds and capital project funds, as you spend them, are both capital funds. It's just that bond funds will be shown as restricted funds because they can only be used for purposes that relate to the bond. But in the eyes of the state, those are both capital expenses. Moving over to nutrition services, you can see there we're trending 81.88%. I'd like to see that be a little bit lower at this point in the year. So I'll watch that in May. We'll see what it does, but I may have to raise that nutrition services just a little bit higher for our year-end amendment in June. Not significantly, but maybe 3 to 5%. Activities is tracking very well. Just a reminder, we always like to see, activity funds were not meant to build balances there. We would anticipate that our revenues and in our expenses over time, 1 year revenue may be a little higher, the next year expenses may be a little higher, but these are funds that we're not looking to build a balance in. We should always have a balance because we don't want those to be in the negative when we end the fiscal year, but we're not looking to see that grow year after year after year. And then before and after school services, again, trending very well there. Even though we're a little over 81%, I do anticipate that 600,000 should be enough for us as we finish the budget for the fiscal year. So then moving down to the bottom right, just looking at the balances there. We know nutrition services, that's something that we are keeping an eye on. We know that, moving into next year and the year after, we'll have to begin to make sure that we are running close to a break even in those categories. Nutrition services was really inflated because of the COVID relief money for the past few years. Now we're in our second year of not receiving any of that, but it is something that, those balances will come down, but we want to see them stay above zero ultimately as we look 2 or 3 years down the road. Activity just a little bit higher, but remember that that's a break even in those activity funds. And then before and after school, highlighted this multiple times throughout the year, but always a good thing when we look at where we're at. Again, we don't want a huge balance in there, but we definitely want to see that run in the positive. And we've been on that trend now for several years. And after several years of running a negative balance there, we're now above zero in the before and after school services fund. If we look at our current balance and we compare it to last year, you'll notice that we're still about just under $2.6 million shy of where we were at this point last year. But as a comparison, if you look back just a month ago, we were almost $4.7 million short as we compared those operating fund balances. And at the time I said, this will close that gap. And we have started to do that. I think with the early childhood special education money, with the continued state actually target being fully funded, possibly in May, but most certainly in June, we should see our current fund balances in operating exceed the same comparison point last year. So definitely moving in the right direction. Again, in 1 month, we made up over $2 million of ground. And I will also say that last year, as a comparison, we received all of our early childhood SPED reimbursement in 1 month. So we received a very large chunk of revenue, whereas this year it's spread out over 3 months, which is typically what the state does. Last year was a little bit of an anomaly in us receiving it all at the same time. A lot of information there, but happy to answer any questions that you might have on the revenue and expense report. All right. So we'll move on to the investment report. We are entering a time of where the investment rate of return is still really good as we compare it historically. But if we were to look back a year ago, we'd see that our liquid rates were higher at that time. Some of the interest rates that we were grabbing, as you look down this report, you see a 5, you see some 4s. Now we're some 4.5s. We're getting in the territory where it's hard to get much above 4% other than liquid funds. So as we think long term, it makes it a little bit challenging because the liquid is our best rate of return right now, and it's hard to turn that down. Yet we know that if the Fed funds cut the rates, that has a direct impact on our liquid rate of return. And so we are, investing 2, 3, 4. We can only go 5 years. That's our limit. But we are investing a little bit more long term when we have the opportunity with funds. And again, these are really idle funds that we don't need in the short term, in the next year, 2, 3 years for our daily expenses. As you look to next year, you just see we have one CD that's coming off right at the end of June, right before the fiscal year closes. And we will definitely beat the 0.6%. But just, looking ahead to next year, we don't have a ton of items that will come off, but we really only have 2, and they're at the very end of the fiscal year. You see the 4.25 on the Treasury and the 3.75. Those, when they expire, we may have a hard time. I mean, none of us have a crystal ball looking 7, 8 months down the road, but we may have a hard time beating those rates of return. My hope would be that we could get very close to where they're at now. But we also have some opportunity that I do feel very confident about coming up here in the next 3 months. You see several agencies all over $1 million, all below 1% rate of return. So we really have some opportunity here in the next few months to lock in, I would say at least 2, and I'm being very conservative there, at least 2% more on some significant 7-figure investments. Liquid still healthy at the bottom there. Anything over 4%, we'll certainly take that. If you don't have to go back more than 4 years to find a time where our liquid rate of return was less than 0.5%. So 3.5% for us is a big deal on the balances that we carry. That's some 7-figure interest differences to the positive when we can get 4% or higher. Any questions on the investment report? All right. The last item that we will look at is our balance sheet. And the balance sheet is really just a reflection of overall balances. And most importantly is the bottom line, really, at the very bottom. But just a couple things that I'll mention, especially for Board Member Dawson, as your first time on this call, some things that you'll see occasionally. In the liabilities line, I'll point out that you see a positive there on accounts payable. That is not common, but it does happen, a few times a year. What happens there is when most typically it seems to be tech, we will receive an order in and it's something that we didn't need or was not what we ordered, most typically would be what it is. And so we'll send it back and the vendor will give us a credit for that. And a lot of our tech vendors are vendors that we use, monthly or bi-monthly, certainly several times throughout the fiscal year. And so that will sit out there as a credit and then they'll credit us on the next invoice. So in the accounts payable line, that would be what you would see there is just a credit on an invoice that we know will clear out before the end of the fiscal year. If it wasn't, then we'd ask that vendor to send us a check for that amount. Then the P card payable is always a liability. This can be as high as $100,000. It can be as low as a few thousand. And really it depends on two things: the time of year, how much volume is going on with the purchasing cards, and then just simply the calendar and when those cutoffs are, because the P card bill is paid weekly. And so that liability will always be hanging out there just a little bit where we know we've incurred the expense, but they have not taken the money from our bank account yet. Those are really the only two items that you would typically see in the liability. We shouldn't really have liabilities in any of the other funds. That would only be in the general operating fund. So then looking at the bottom, the main thing that I wanted to point out with our balances, we went ahead and reflected something that we don't always do, but remember at the April board meeting, we had our budget amendment. And with that amendment, we said we plan to transfer $5 million from the general fund to our capital projects fund. It's very typical for us to do a transfer at the end of the year. We've made some significant transfers in the last 3 years with some of the ESSER monies that we were using for some one-time capital expenses. And so you'll see that transfer reflected. And so if you look down at the fund balance adjustment in our capital projects fund, you see that that's actually a credit, that $5 million. And that makes our capital projects balance $2.6 million. If you remember from our April amendment that we anticipated our budget would end on June 30th being just over a balance of about 2.4 million. Now, very important distinction there. That was made pre-bond, of course. And so we know we have some expenses that will move over to bond expenses because they're project related. And so that balance then will come back up. That 5 million could change. Maybe we decide to do 6 million. Maybe we decide to only do 4 because we want our operating reserve to stay at a percentage very close to where we ended last fiscal year. So that's not written in stone, but we went ahead and reflected that because that's actually what the budget amendment reflected. Don't have to continue doing that, but it's certainly something that we could do moving forward if we want to. Any questions on the balance sheet?
Okay. Hi, it's Michelle. So you pointed out the 5 million, but then I see another adjustment of 36.9 under special revenue teachers fund. Is that typical for April?
So this is going to be year to date through April.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, this would be from July 1 to April 30th. And yes, it is typical because we do not levy any money in the special revenue fund. And so we always, our revenues do not equal our expenses. And so we transfer money, which is really the first thing we did is we made that $2.7 million transfer. That's what we'll do at the board meeting. So we transfer money typically every month from operating to special revenue to cover that amount. And so we will end the year at zero in our special revenue fund.
Okay, got it. So this is cumulative balance sheet. The 2 million that we're going to transfer in the agenda item before this is part of that, right?
Absolutely. Yep, you got it.
Okay, got it. Catching on. Okay, and then one clarifying question that under fund balance on the bottom left, that
Mhm.
first row, the first row reflects the actual balance of what we have today, as of April 30th, 2025, right?
Correct.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Yep.
I'm sure I have 1,000 more questions, but I'll ask you offline. Still learning.
Anytime. Yep. Oh, you're always welcome.
All right, thank you, Mr. Holder. Before we move on to section 3, I believe Dr. Barger has some information related to the question that was asked earlier.
All right, Board Member Dawson, I apologize. I got into that quick review and now I have a better sense of what you were asking. So that was my fault. Typically, when we do some licenses and not a whole, it's because of grade level, but I reread that and stepped out to the person who worked with contract negotiation on that. And it's just simply a result of the size of Lee Summit Elementary. So because Lee Summit Elementary is so small and only needs the 225 licenses, it's cheaper to do a per license cost at that elementary than to do building wide, because of their base cost for building wide would be above buying it per license for that number of students.
Oh, so it wouldn't be equal to what MLE pays, the 11,000, it would be a higher number.
It would be a higher number. And so it was
Okay.
more cost effective. I think it was 90-ish. I don't know the exact, we would need 90 some or approximately licenses, according to the person who did the math, to reach. It was the cheaper way to do it. It's not, like I said, typically we will do that when we're only doing a couple of grades, but this has to do with the size of Lee Summit Elementary and it being cheaper to do it by license as opposed to what they have as a minimum for a building wide.
Okay. All right. Thank you so
Apologize
much.
for having to come back. I should have known that, but I had much clearer sense of what was being asked after I sat with it for a second. Thank you for the grace.
No, I appreciate that. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Dr. Barger. Moving on to section 3, facilities, and before I turn over to Mr. Grell, there is a long list of items in this section this month. And I just want to say thank you to our community for supporting the bond, because of that support and because of the opportunity we have now, because of the revenue that's going to come in, we're able to do a lot of projects, build some buildings and go through the design process and replace some roofs and replace mechanical. And so, but all of this is because what we're going to cover here is because of the support of our community and the passage of the bond. So thank you for that. All right, Mr. Gorell.
All right, good morning, and what a great introduction. Yes, this the bond issue has opened up a lot of great opportunities for the kids and the staff of our district. So just getting started with round 1, we've got the next 4 years of construction, and then we'll hopefully get back out there and start it all over again. So the first item this month is a contract with Dake Wells Architecture. And back in 2023, we had issued an RFP as required, or an RFQ actually, as required by our board policy to hire architectural services. And so the board at that time approved 3 architects to be used for the 2025 bond. Dake Wells and Insight Design were chosen for elementary and middle school projects, and then Multi-Studio was chosen as the architect for any high school related work. So this project is related to the improvements to Pleasantly Middle School. It is a full service architectural design fee. It is a lump sum fee that we have evaluated based on their hours per phase of work and are comfortable with their number. These fees are built into what we call the soft cost of the project. For example, the Pleasantly Middle School project is a $32 million total project cost. About 23% of that is soft cost, and so that pays for the design, the furniture, building permits, all the other ancillary costs that go into building a building. So this is budgeted in the 2025 bond within that project. So the scope of work involves, in addition to the building, for what we think right now would be kind of a sixth grade pod that would function in a middle school setting, kind of similar to how East Rails Middle School functions. And then we would also get in and renovate the main part of the building, everything north of the cafeteria, and turn that into more of a middle school style seventh and eighth grade area. So we are just getting into design, don't know exactly how this will all unfold, but we are really excited for the opportunities for Pleasantly Middle School. So I'd be glad to answer any questions about this contract.
Okay, so you mentioned at the beginning that back a couple of years ago, it was a 2023, you awarded three firms. So each of these firms, you said that this was the first wave. So are they each just doing the ones listed here in this list, or are there coming projects that they're also going to do from the bond?
Yeah, there are coming projects. This is just round one. So we have Hazel Grove Elementary School, for example, that will start in about a year. So you'll see a contract in about a year for insight design for that building. Dake Wells, this was, as of right now, this is the only contract that they were assigned to as the CAC prioritized them. So this is the only contract we have right now with Dake Wells. But
Okay.
yeah, so this is just round one for the first phase of projects in the bond.
Okay, got it. Yeah, I was trying to get my brain around their capacity. If we're going to be throwing multiple projects at each of these three, if they're gonna have the capacity. But if this is just the one, then I'm sure we're good.
Yeah, we have staged the bond projects to not only allow for successful project delivery by our consultants, but also to help district staff in all departments manage all the effort that goes into opening and moving into new space. And so we're looking to finish two projects in the summer of 27, two in the summer of 28, and then one in the summer of 29, probably maybe two in 29. We still have some unknowns in our scope, but just trying to spread that out over 3 summers so that we're not overloading any department or consultant.
Board Member Dawson, during the board retreat on June 6th, we're going to have about an hour for a bond update. And one of the things we'll cover at that time is the overall schedule of the projects when they're slated to begin the design process and then all the way to move in. And so it'll be mapped out, as Mr. Gorell said, and with those start dates and those end dates for each of those projects.
Cool. Great. I look forward to it. Thanks.
All right, I'll move on to the next agenda item. This is a roofing repair contract. And this is something that we have done typically about every 5 years. The last roof repair contract that the board approved was in 2020. It was a pandemic project going on that summer. So about every 5 years, we have our roofing consultant benchmark provide a reinspection of all of our roofing systems. And it's part of our roof management plan. They discover many defects that have occurred for various reasons over all of our roofs. And so every 5 years, we take the result of that inspection and we turn it into a bid package to repair everything that they found. And so we have found great value in that. It takes care of a lot of leaks that we do have, but also a lot of these repairs are in areas that aren't leaks yet, but that will prevent them and also extend the lives of our roofs. So in our opinion, this is really good preventive money to spend on our roof systems and covers almost every building in the district in some way, shape, or form. So I'll be glad to answer any questions that you may have.
Yeah, I have another one. So I looked through the bid comparisons and everything looked great. I'm glad we're getting this work done. Um, but I did notice that the winning bidder, Flynn, their proposed schedule is way shorter than the other two bidders. I'm assuming that by contract, we're just going to hold them to that. And I mean, it was like half the time as everybody else. So are they then obligated by contract to be able to meet those schedule dates?
They are, although on our roofing contracts, we do not build in what we call liquidated damages, where we would penalize them. Um, and although that is a finish date that they will have in their contract, we have over the last 4 or 5 years given some flexibility to our roofers if they want to work in the evenings after school starts, and especially on minor repairs like this. But roofing labor is kind of an interesting thing. I mean, these guys, they staff up and do large projects, and then they have a bunch of people free. And so there can be, in any given year or season, a lot of disparity between the labor pool that any given company has available at the time.
Gotcha. So that wasn't a surprise to see one was so dramatically different from the other two.
No, it really wasn't.
Okay, gotcha.
And we did bid this project a little late in the year, and so a lot of the roofers were booked up for the summer.
Ah.
And so, I mean, we would have expected to have seen all of them have a little shorter windows, but because we were kind of late in the year and waiting on the bond to pass, some of the other roofers had just booked up and didn't have the time to get it done in the summer. So we do plan, this is going to seem really fresh, but we're going to, in the fall, bid our roofing projects for next summer and
Okay.
get ahead of that labor curve and just try to avoid that for next year.
Oh, that's great news. Thanks.
Yeah. Okay, so the next contract is with Insight Design Group, and this is to design and do construction administration for a new elementary school for Greenwood. And really excited for this project. We are just about done with schematic design, kind of have the building laid out, and we'll share some more detailed information with the board, as Dr. Shelton mentioned in the board retreat. So this project, and I should have mentioned schedule on Pleasantly also. This project, we expect to bid in late fall and start construction in the winter. Have about a little over a year to build it, with the summer of 27 for move-in and just finishing things up. And so we're just a couple years out from having a brand new elementary school, and this is the first step in the process. So I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Yep, I have one on this one.
Sure.
Bear with me, I'm looking through my notes. Okay, so I have a question about the summary. It explained how the original work with Insight was a renovation, and then that changed, and we're building a new building. So is the scope of work that they worked on for the renovation, is that already paid for, or are you rolling over any contract value from the old one to the new one? Like, does it impact the dollar amount that's here, the proposed fees of 2.9 million for the new construction? Does that old work that they did impact that at all?
There was a portion of work that does apply to any district building an elementary school. They work through programming, which is, just kind of space allocation, the district needs as it comes from education. And so the programming and how the space is laid out from an area standpoint was applicable to this project. There was some work in the design, the addition related to the current site the building sits on. Obviously, you know, that work does not apply to a new building, but yeah, we've worked to just apply as much of that programming that we could to this new building.
Mhm. But the vendor is whole, like they've been paid for the work for that work that they did already. It's not going to roll into or out of that 2.9 million for the new building, right?
Yeah, the vendor has been paid, and they have been made whole with the money that they've spent.
Okay, gotcha. All right. And that was already in an old budget before my time. All done. Right. Okay, thanks. Thanks.
And Board Member Dawson, you know, those expenses will be reimbursed to the district through the sale of this 42.5 million in the bond, so.
Gotcha. Thanks.
Okay, the next contract is with Lippert. Lippert is a mechanical contractor that has given us a price for replacing the chillers that are at Summit Lakes Middle School. Without getting into too much detail, Summit Lakes has a pretty kind of unique chiller set up, and we were only able to find a couple of manufacturers that could maintain that layout, and so we did receive cooperative bids from several different companies, and Lippert provided us with the best number to replace those. You know, thankfully, with the passage of the bond issue, we have a number of systems that are at end of life in the district that we're going to be bringing to the board to replace each year. And you know, the district back in 1999 to 2002 went through a lot of air conditioning projects. That was kind of the early days where a lot of our buildings were air conditioned. Summit Lakes was built at that time. And so we have a number of buildings that still have original systems that are now, you know, 25 years old and are at end of life. So these are the original chillers to Summit Lakes and are the central part of cooling that building. And we've had a number of repairs on them over the last couple of years. So we're excited to get this work done and regain some confidence in being able to keep the building cool. So I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Yeah, I do have a question on this one. So it looks like it didn't go out for bid. So are they their current maintainer of these? Are we just replacing something that they've been servicing all along from the original? Did we just choose Lippert because that's who makes these specific chillers?
No, actually, Lippert is an installer, and they're installing a Carrier chiller. As it just so happens, I mean, we got a number from Carrier to do their own install, and Lippert was cheaper. So,
okay, gotcha. Oh, so it did go out for bid. It just didn't show here that it went out for bid. Okay.
Yeah, and we
cool.
we had a number of contracts. What we will do, especially with complicated projects, there's a lot of give and take to these unique mechanical situations where we will reach out to a number of vendors and get cooperative purchasing bids. You know, and as Kevin mentioned earlier, it leaves them the latitude to get competitive when they know they're bidding against other people. And so that way we can work with them on the unique project requirements. We also do that with roofing. We have 4 really good roofers. They are all on co-ops, and we work with them and get competitive bids for our roofing projects too. So yeah, these were all the bids that we got were from cooperative purchasing agreements.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, you know, when I read it, you know, flat, I don't have the context yet, but now I'm getting it. So thank you very much. Appreciate it.
No, great questions. Knowing we had new board members, I could have probably been a little more explanative on that. Okay, the next contract is with Multi-Studio. Multi-Studio, as I mentioned earlier, was chosen to do our high school projects. And Really, the only high school project that we have left on the bond is to handle the turf replacement at north and west, and also a field at high. So the bond project will replace the turf on all three soccer stadiums and also provide synthetic turf on baseball and softball at Lee Summit North and Lee Summit West. So we are just getting started with this project. We expect to begin sometime in the spring, finish this project next year. Still kind of working through athletic schedules and how we can phase this work to meet contractor ability as well as our athletic sports schedules. So we will start this summer. Multi-Studio will lead us through evaluating the turf that we will select, as well as putting together bid documents to competitively bid this work. So be glad to answer any questions. All right, so the next agenda item is with a company called Navigate, and we would like to use them for bond pre-construction services. And this work will support our pre-bid work on the bonds and performing construction estimates, and also helping with phasing and scheduling plans for the various projects. There is not a lump sum because it will just be an as-needed service. So they will be on call and work with our architects to help make sure that we stay on track with our budget and our schedule. Two most important components of a project. And so if the board approves this contract, we have a meeting set up with them next Monday, and we'll begin planning how they integrate into our design teams to help support that effort. We do have some money budgeted into the soft cost of each project to help support this expense, and really feel like it will be value added to the projects. So I'll be glad to answer any questions. Okay, so the next agenda item is for on-call surveying services. We put out an RFQ through IonWave and had 3 land surveyors submit responses. All 3 of them were highly qualified, and after talking with the purchasing department, we decided just to issue contracts to all 3 of them. And as surveying needs come up, we will just reach out and get pricing from each one, and then just move forward from there. These services will be used not only for land purchases that may come up in the future, but also if we have surveying needs on construction projects where our design teams need surveying in advance of their design. So I'll be glad to answer any questions that may come up.
Yeah, I got a question on this one. So because we have 3 and they're on call, do we have any minimum requirement and the documents on the agenda for the 15th? Sorry, I apologize. I didn't know that we had this other agenda. In that one, Exhibit A is not attached, so I didn't have any details. Are we required to use each of the 3 a certain minimum number of times, or is it just an on-call, and if you're available, we're going to go to you, and if you're not available, we're going to go to the next one? I mean, or do we have to use each of the 3 a certain number of times to fulfill anything in the contract?
Yeah, there's no minimum expectation in the contract. It is purely just on call. If we never used them, then we would not be in breach of our contract.
Okay.
Technically,
And-
by board policy, we have the ability to negotiate surveying services up to 25,000. If it's over 25,000, which would be a rare project, we would make sure to just get at least 2 bids. We would really prefer to get bids from all 3 of them if it got to that level.
But as long as it's below 25, you can just go to each one as needed, right?
Yeah, well, technically we could negotiate with one of them under 25,000, but we will still, even if it's under that, just to make sure we get the best price possible, reach out to all 3 of them.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay. So you're going to reach out to all three each time. Okay. It's not just you're
Yeah.
all in call. We've already negotiated hourly rates. Here, you're going to get this one because we need it done in 2 weeks or whatever. Okay.
Right. Yeah.
Got it. Okay. Now I understand. Thank you so much.
Hey, you're welcome. Okay, the next agenda item is with Quality Mechanical. Again, a much needed mechanical replacement project at Meadow Lane Elementary School. And the board a few months ago approved a contract to order equipment. The equipment that's going to be replaced, we needed to get that moving a little bit sooner just so that we could get the project moving. This is for the installation of that equipment that was previously bought. And again, just like Summit Lakes, Meadow Lane has a very unique kind of zoned mechanical system. There are a few larger units on the roof that create some complexity. So we went through the same type of a model. We reached out to various contractors, received bids, and we're really only able to get bids from 2 people. If anybody cares to have conversation off the books, there's a lot of complication in projects right now related to new refrigerant changes that are required by the EPA. And we're having to renovate some things at that building that create some complications there. So anyway, the bid from Quality Mechanical, we've worked with them a lot in the past. We're very comfortable with their ability to implement this work. They came in and did a $1 million job for us last summer at Bernard Campbell, and made it through and implemented a huge project over the summer at Campbell last year successfully. So we are comfortable with them and with their number, and our project came in well underneath our engineer's estimate for what they expected the project cost to be. So I'll be glad to answer any questions.
All right, Mr.
Yeah.
Gorell, thank you so much. Moving on to our final section, section 4, future agenda items. Board member Haley knows about this agenda item already. This is something we do every month. So Board Member Dawson, this is a document that is a living document. It changes over time. And this is a document to help the board know what we're working on as on the administrative staff side, and projects or agenda items that we will be bringing to the board in the future. And so this is just a peek around the corner to see what's coming. And so this month was be honest with you, kind of an outlier. It was a big month for us, a lot of agenda items this month. June looks like there's going to be a lot of agenda items again, but I would say that's pretty common because this is the time of year that we are wrapping up the school year and planning the work for next school year. And so a lot of these projects and contracts have to be finalized and brought to the board in this, during this time of the year. So this is available to you. And if you ever have any questions about anything we're working on, this is a good place to start to see what we're working on. And then if there are any questions, please just reach out to any of the project managers that you see here on the right side of this table. All right, that concludes our meeting for today, unless there are any other questions.
No, but I just wanted to say thank you everyone for your patience and answering all my questions. I'm in learning mode this month, so thank you.
We appreciate you being here and knowing that this is your first meeting. And anytime, ask as many questions and any questions that you want. That's why you're here, is to ask those questions and to gain that understanding.
Thanks.
That concludes our meeting for today. Thank you.
Thank you.